Thank you very much. My mum's there. She said, make sure you look to the right. So, always there to guide me. My biggest fan. I was brought up in a family that challenged the norm, although, of course, at the time I didn't realise it. My family lived and rented an apartment in a commune that was set up by my grandfather in the late 1940s. 3 families collected together and spent what they would have on a family home, and bought a very large house in Kent. They were very cheap after the war, so it was affordable. The original agreement was that it was 1 room per person, and as your family grew, you would change and accommodate accordingly. There was a nursery on site. My grandfather was a psychiatrist. He believed he believed that women should be able to go to work. And you sort of grew up in this incredibly supportive environment where your parents weren't really your parents, even though you lived in a very secure and safe family home. I think living communally taught me many things. From the sort of value of sharing to the importance of different generations. So I would come home every night from school when I was 6 years old and look after my great-grandmother in the top corner there. She died when she was 111, the oldest woman in Great Britain, in the Guinness Book of Records. My claim to fame is that I was on John Craven's news round blowing out her candles on her 109th birthday. I don't think she survived that long because of my care, I would like to say. But I think that the sort of sense of support and that that looking after each other and making sure that you valued everybody in society, whether or not they were 110 or your same age. And if I reflect now, it's my mum and my brother and sister, and I think about how I was brought up, and it wasn't a nuclear family. It wasn't the kind of normal way things were done. And I think that I grew up in a family where my dad, when he left school, couldn't cook an egg, couldn't even boil an egg. But by the time he raised a family, he, in many respects, was the one who sort of looked after us. And my mum, this is classic. My dad cooking, my mum mending the car, whilst my dad's reading the paper. So I had the most extraordinary role model, I think, in a woman who went to work, who looked after us and supported us, but showed that everything could be, that you could achieve all of those things. But I'm no different to anybody else. That's me trying to rebel. I'm like, can I find a picture from my punk age? And that's as bad as it got. And the reality is you don't actually need to rebel if your parents are so annoyingly kind of not really there. I don't mean that rudely. But if your parenting is shared by a lot of different people, if you're able to go to the woman upstairs who teaches you all you need to or don't need to know about sex, then your mum doesn't have to do that for you. And I think that it means that you have a real kind of interest and an appreciation, and that you don't actually get angry with your parents. It's a really good model. And what else does it teach you? It teaches you, as I said before, about the importance of the next generation. And this is my dad looking after my great-grandmother, and both my kids, who have the most incredible relationship now with my mum. And I think that's because, as I said before, there's a kind of sense of mutual support. And when you live nearby each other, you have a very kind of different relationship. And I think, being brought up in a commune isn't for everybody, but it teaches you, and I think it's a really interesting model for a society where we are at this moment, where we need to think about, as an aging population, different demographics. Not everybody can afford to live and buy a home. We rented our apartments. I think I think as we move forward, sometimes it's good to look back. the other thing it teaches you is that you can be super independent and take risks. And I think I have two young, well, they're not that young anymore, 20 and 22. But if I look back at my own girls, my two children, I think, my goodness me, how extraordinary that they've grown up with a kind of independence and a spirit and a joie de vivre that comes from a kind of independence of being in a place and space where you, where at 16 you say, Mum, I'm going to Vietnam. I'm like, oh, it's nice, darling. Yeah. Who are you going with? I'm going on my own. I'm going, okay. How long for? 3 months. I'm like, okay. And how are you getting round? Oh, I'm going to hire a motorbike. Okay. And a 22-year-old who leaves to go to Australia, not knowing anybody, no job, and sends me pictures like that saying, don't worry, Mum, I've got the loo roll covered. So when the dust cloud, I don't know if you remember, there was a volcano about 10 years ago that exploded, and I found myself in Valencia with my two girls. They were about 10 and 12 at the time, and I couldn't get home. And I had this kind of, I was judging something, and I thought, and I really need to get back for this award ceremony. So the three of us hitchhiked from Valencia, and we, I don't know how many thousands of miles, but it took a couple of days, and quite a few lorry drivers in between. And I arrived at the award ceremony, and I got changed into my gown in the loo, and I sat around the table, as usual, the only woman. And I was so wired, I was so impressed that I'd got there on time, that I had slightly too many glasses of champagne. Those of you who know me probably can see a pattern there. And I sat next to this guy, and we started chatting, and he's like, oh, I'm a sailor. And at that point, my fabulous father, who I lost when I was quite young, who used to take us sailing, and I started welling up, because it was like, it's my dad, and I had a few glasses of wine, and he's like, oh, shit. Clearly not knowing how to handle this woman who was about to blub. And so he said, come sailing with me. And so I always say yeah. I say yeah to everything. And what did that mean? It meant that I ended up not on a really posh boat drinking champagne, which is kind of how I imagined it, but hanging off the side of probably the fastest keel boat in the UK at the time, and ending up winning the Commodore's Cup as part of the GB team. So the thinking is always say yes when strange men ask you to join them on a boat. I've always been a complete creep. And this is me as a school. I loved school. I really loved school. I wish I could say I was really, I was really cool. But I was so not cool. I really, really loved school, and I worked really hard. And I've always worked really hard. But I've always played really hard. And I think that that's something that really defines not only myself, but the people that I've ended up working with. And I think my life kind of came into focus when I met Alex and Philip. And suddenly, all the things that I believed in and all the things that I wanted to do, I kind of found some friends to do it with. And it was the most extraordinary lesson in finding people who believe in the same things as you, who have the same priorities, and who work as hard as you. And we had kind of success came quite quickly in many ways. And I think that it culminating 20 years later in winning the Sterling Prize. And that's me looking really happy. And instead of having a big party, instead of going to the kind of posh dinner that the ROBA had asked us to do, we said, no, we're going to have a party. Well, actually, it wasn't us. It was a couple of girls in the office who said, I think we should have a party for Hastings, for the people of Hastings. And I'm thinking, God, that sounds expensive. And she said, no, I think we should have a party for the people in Hastings, just in case. We didn't know we'd won. We seriously didn't know we'd won. And so anyway, we ended up having a party for everybody in Hastings, and it was Halloween. And we had a kind of live link up. The BBC was there. And I thought, just in case, it was a fancy dress party, of course. Just in case we win, I'm going to wear a frock, nice frock, but I'll go with a couple of fangs just to sort of, play the part. And of course, I'm there being interviewed by the guy from the BBC, and I'm lisping on telly, and I'm thinking, God, I must be really piffed. Really, and he's saying, how fabulous it is, and I'm going, it's really, the most, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I got my teeth in, and as my mother pointed out, darling, what on earth do you have in your mouth? But I think that the peer was something that taught me many things, and it taught me that as architects you are curators, and that you don't always have to put your own architectural ambition ahead of what actually the community needs or wants. And the most extraordinary thing about that project, and the reason I think that we won the Sterling Prize, is that that project has a soul. And I think there's something extraordinary about buildings that have that kind of presence. And I think it has that kind of presence because it's so full of people's passion and emotion and ambition. And when you go there, you can feel it. And it's the most extraordinary thing. And I don't think that that's something that as architects we can take credit for. But I think it's really important. And I think it's important to make sure that when you make buildings that reflect the way that you feel. And in order to make buildings that reflect the way you feel, you have to remember that there's a whole team of people, and they're all there, who make sure that you do that. And if you want to make joyful buildings or buildings that have a spirit, then you need people to design them, and the people who design them have to have that spirit and that joy within them. And I think they also have to be representative of a world that we live in. And I'm really proud that we have over 50% girls in our office, and I'm really proud that we have, out of 50 people, 21 nationalities. And I think that that's something that when you all put your hand up this evening, I'm like, oh my God, we really are properly sort of national, international, and I think that that's something incredibly wonderful. So inspiring your team and making sure that between you, you're in the place and right space to make great buildings, I think is really important. It also became increasingly obvious to me that as a woman in the profession, there's a kind of sense of responsibility that you have to make sure that you are making the best of being a role model. And it's not always difficult. I know I look like I'm super confident, but it's quite tough. And when I was inaugurated as the architectural, the AA's president, I had to give this speech, and I spent weeks trying to write this really kind of over architectural speaky speak, which I wrote this speech and I didn't even understand it, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, I can't, how can I possibly compete with all these incredibly intelligent people and talk about something really profound that's going to make everybody really impressed by my architectural knowledge. And I soon realized that it just wasn't going to happen. So I screwed up and threw it away. And I talked about my dad, because my dad would probably be super proud if he'd been there to see me, but he wasn't able, because he died when I was much younger. And so I told the story about my dad being at the AA, and that story just connected to an audience who were the mums and dads of the students who were getting their diplomas, and it taught me something. It taught me that actually just talking about things that matter to you and that are important to you is the way that you can connect and make a difference. And I think with all the things that I do, all the different roles that I have now, that's the lesson that I've taken with me. And that is that you speak from the heart, and if you speak passionately about what it is that you're interested in, then actually good things follow. And good things follow because you have an integrity that comes with talking about what you believe in. And my God, you meet the most incredible people, and you realize that the inspiration of others is something that drives you and is something that is incredibly important if you need to kind of keep yourself going. And that's exactly what I was doing, and it was all going so well, and then I got bloody breast cancer. And I think that those of you who know me will know that whenever I talk about this, I say if I stay alive, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, other than having new bosoms that mean that you have great... you look like your teenage daughters. I mean, every cloud has a silver lining. What did that mean? What did it mean to me? I spent... I think you kind of really reassess your life, and really, it depends what kind of person you are, but for me, it meant that I did really extreme things. I kind of cycled around the world. I climbed Kilimanjaro, and time became super important to me. I had to eat it up. I had to kind of take everything that was coming, and that. I think when I got to the top of Kilimanjaro, I realized that actually, if the cancer didn't kill me, I'd kill myself. Kind of like trying to just prove that I was being alive, and I took stock, and I thought, actually, what really matters is the people that you love and the people that look after you, and I put this up because these are my best friends. And when I was at my 50th birthday party, that we all turned up in exactly the same. We didn't, just by chance. Which I think, and I haven't got time to tell you the Burning Man story. I'll take that for another one. But I realized actually that one of the most important things that you can do is to support others. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is setting up something called the Next Generation at the National Infrastructure Commission that really encourages young people, young professionals to have an opportunity to influence policy in a way that they wouldn't be able to normally. To set up something called the National Infrastructure Commission, the design panel, which is looking to make sure that all infrastructure of national significance has and is subject to design review, and somebody gives really kind of thinks about how our built environment is properly thought about. So we think about our buildings, but we're not thinking enough about our infrastructure. And I've also set up something called the Quality of Life Foundation, which sets out to really understand what it is that matters to people and to try to encourage the industry to think better about how we can improve people's quality of life through our built environment. So I can't pretend that when I wanted to be young, I had this kind of, I was going to be Prime Minister. I wish I did. I wish I had the ambition, and I wish I had the confidence when I was a young woman to think that that was possible. And I don't think that it's possible, and it's the last job on earth that I'd actually want to do. But I think it's really incumbent on us as a profession to think hard how we can make a difference, and think hard about the massive challenges that we have and need to respond to. And I just would say it's not too late, and there's no excuse not to. Thank you.